phenomenon Manius seems to be wise in this world, let him become a fool that he may be wise, Saint Paul said. I am Valery Fadeev, and this is my series Transforming Humanism on overcoming the global political and cultural crisis. The question is, how does one resist the temptation of the Grand Inquisitor, and does one preserve their freedom in this drastically changing world? We know the traditional familiar Western answer: do as we do, institute liberal market democracy, and you will do great. The claim that democracy is a sine qua non of prosperity has nearly become a dogma. The problem is, things in the West are far from being as great as they used to be just a short while ago. On the contrary, the West has been plunged into a severe crisis, and its achievements are vanishing before our very eyes. Additionally, there are many examples of successful development outside the Western paradigm. The starkest example of the last few decades is China. That is certainly not a Western type democracy, yet its economy has been growing explosively for several decades. China is claimed to be an exception, and market capitalism will force a country to switch to democracy, or else rapid economic growth will stop and the prosperity of the entire Chinese people will never be achieved. In fact, economic history shows that China's current economic rise is not an exception, but rather the norm, the rule. Indeed, when we juxtapose economic development and prosperity with developed democratic institutions, we state that the richest states are Western democracies. However, to understand the link between democracy and economy, we need to look at the political regimes those countries had when they embarked on their rapid economic development tracks, and the picture here will be quite different. I will quote the eminent sociologist and Russian studies specialist Anatol Levin, who said that there were only two examples of democracy and rapid economic development being in synchrony. This is the US in the 19th century and several European states, Eastern European states in our time. Levin says that you can create any democracy if you had 3 million square miles of land to distribute among your population. Consequently, you have no such problems as peasants revolting against aristocracy. You have no problems with ethnic minorities, because you have simply exterminated all of them. Those European countries living continues that jump-started their economy in the 18th century like Great Britain, or in the 19th century like other states, there are no democracies. Great Britain was an oligarchy ruled by its aristocracy and commercial classes. All other European states were at the time either oligarchies like France or Belgium, or autocracies like Germany. Levin says that those Asian states that have prospered in the last few decades are either oligarchies like Japan or authoritarian states like Taiwan, Singapore, South Korea, Hong Kong or China. Another outstanding intellectual of today, the sociologist Calhoun, talks of three ideas that influence Western politicians and Western public and are additionally exported throughout the world, including to Russia. We certainly know these ideas well. The first idea, or wave as Calhoun calls it, is neoliberalism. Neoliberalism meant that there was the economy and nothing else. It was a special kind of economy to boot, one based on egoistic behavior of individuals, on competition of all with all, and this competition simply needs to be liberated from any shackles and restraining mechanisms to make it highly successful. Craig Calhoun's second wave, while neoliberals, they're mostly economists, they are followed by political scientists who seek to gain the same kind of prestige. They advocate democratization. They are people who develop theories of democratic transformation in those states that used to be dictatorships. Finally, the third and starkest wave is pictured in Huntington's famous book Clash of Civilizations. He claimed that human behavior is not determined by economy or politics. It is utterly determined by culture, which he calls civilization. Craig Calhoun calls it a shell game. These are free theories, and Western political forces put free shells on a table before you. We have experienced it firsthand. They say you need to institute free market economy. Things did not work out with people's prosperity. They say you have wrong democratic political institutions. Countries start changing their political institutions. Still, not all of them succeed. Then they say you have the wrong civilizational core. You have the wrong culture. You need to change your culture because yours does not allow you to accept Western values, Western civilizational values, democratic values, market values. Once again, Craig Calhoun calls it a shell game, and he is an outstanding US sociologist.
Россия находится в ряду стран, пострадавших от модных теорий.
Russia is one of the countries that are harmed by these fashionable theories. First of all, the economic shock therapy we went through is a neoliberalist policy. Of course, the economic situation before the collapse of the Soviet Union was dire. Shortages, galloping inflation, critical state of governmental finances, economic ties breaking down in the collapsing Soviet Union. Nonetheless, Russian reformers threw themselves at their task with surprising fervor. I will quote another outstanding contemporary sociologist, Michael Mann, who said about reforms in Russia that neoliberalism in the shape it had assumed in Russia focused on destroying the two guarantors of compliance with laws and rules in society and economy, the state and the Communist Party. Neoliberalism also destroyed their underlying ideology, the planned economy and rigid hierarchy were destroyed, but nothing was installed in their place. People believed that free market would naturally take their place. It did not happen. It had never happened. Never, nowhere in the world, and at no time in history, said the US sociologist Michael Mann. The theory used by our Russian reformers is simply false. Its conclusions are mistaken, and that's why the consequences of putting the theory in practice are so tragic. And that applies to human rights too, and human rights is one of the linchpins of today's democracy. What happened to the right to life in Russia? Excessive deaths in the 1990s are pegged at 4 million. These people died because their life no longer had any meaning. What happened to the right to work? Millions lost their jobs and they lost a chance at self-fulfillment. What happened to the right to hold property? Thugs took away people's property. What happened to the right to pensions? They were no longer enough to live on, and even those measly pensions were not paid out regularly. The entire situation was not particularly different from the Soviet one, as reflected in an old joke. Do I have the right? Yes, you do. Then I may? No, you may not. While the Soviet joke referred to political rights that people can have some kind of life without, the situation Russia found itself in the 1990s was about the very right to live.
Впрочем, у реформаторов, возможно, были другие задачи.
Reformers likely had other objectives. Building an efficient market economy was a secondary goal at best. Their primary purpose was destroying every key political, social and economic system that would allow socialism to survive. That was their real task. Anatoly Chubais, one of Russia's principal reformers, openly admitted it. He said, "I hate the Soviet system. Moreover, there are few things in life I hate as much as the Soviet system, especially in its later stages. Nothing more disgusting than the Soviet system in its later stages has ever happened in my life."
Я прошу быть правильно понятым. Я не выступаю против демократии. Без народного представительства.
I don't want to be misunderstood. I am not against democracy. Today's state, which is an extremely complex system, cannot function without popular representation and without authorities receiving feedback from the people. I am certainly not against human rights and freedoms. On the contrary, I submit to you that crisis trends in the West involve abolishing human rights and freedoms, as they have existed for the last few decades.